Today is a great day because we're starting in the deep end today. We're starting in the deep end. We're talking about death to death. Death to death. And obviously, this is an easy day and a hard day. It's easy because everybody knows what we're talking about. But it's hard because everybody knows what we're talking about. And so as we're talking about the resurrection of Jesus, we're going to be in Matthew chapter 27. If you're one of those people, you're like, all right, let's skip past all this talking. Let's get into this word. We'll be in Matthew chapter 27, and then we'll be in Ezekiel chapter 37. But before we get there, what I want to do is I want to make sure that we have the same foundation before we go into unpacking Matthew chapter 27. Sometimes when we come to church, we jump into scripture or we jump into a topic, but we all don't have the same understanding. We're not all starting from the same starting point. And so before we jump into that, I want to make sure we're starting on the same starting point. Is that okay? Yes. All right. Now, in order for this to work today, we're going to have to be real Baptists. You know what I'm talking about? You're going to have to talk back to me today. All right, it's one of those kind of days. So if I say something, it's okay to say, I need some amens. Come on, somebody. Hello? Are y'all here today? Amen. Listen, I need to know I'm in a good Baptist church. All right, talk back to me today. All right, so before we get to Matthew chapter 27, I just want to make sure that we have the same foundation. And I want to start by asking you a question. Have you ever experienced a time where you felt like you was about to die? Yeah, there we go. Where you felt like you were about to die. I remember when I was a child, I was about 10 years old or so, and I was at my dad's house, and I was about to go to the store. Now, there was a little convenience store on the corner. We called it the corner store. You know what I'm talking about? Where my corner store folk at? All right. We called it the corner store. Now, at that time, I had $1. And so $1 was going to go a long way back in that day. So I sound like those people that I heard growing up. Gas was only 10 cents. But those were good times. Well, I was going to this corner store. I had $1, so I'm excited. I'm going to the corner store. I'm like, I'm about to go crazy. And so at that time, you could get a bag of chips for 25 cents. So I could get 2 bags of chips. Hear me. And then I could get a juice for 25 cents. We called them Huggies. All right? So now we're 75 cents in. I got me 2 bags of chips. I got me a Huggy. And I got 25 cents remaining. Now, if you go to the register, you can get those little baggies of candy. You can get them for 10 cents a piece. All right? So I can get 2 bags. So I can get 2 bags of chips, 1 Huggy, and 2 little bags of candy. And I got 5 cents left, and I'm living good. You know what I'm saying? So I'm happy. It's a good day. I'm in the corner store. I got my stuff. I'm leaving. I'm like, oh, I'm about to tear this stuff up. It's a good day. And all of a sudden, I hear this this heavy panting, like closing in on me, like, and I'm like, what is this heavy panting? And I turn this way, and there's this dog charging at me at full speed. Probably a dinosaur. I'm not going to lie. This was a dino dog that was charging at me. And at that moment, I'm like, I'm about to die. And I had to make a decision. So what I'm going to do? I'm going to run. So I'm running as fast as I can. I'm 10 years old. I'm getting tired. I really just want my chips and my Huggy. And so this dog is closing in on me. And I'm thinking to myself, this is about to be the end. And so I got to make a decision. The dog is coming. I'm losing steam. This thing is right on my heel. And he's looking at me like, I'm about to have me some Paul. It's about to be a good day. And so I'm running. I'm like, all right, I got to figure something out. And all of a sudden, I don't know what came on me, but I turned around. I was like, roar, 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 roar. And that dog looked at me and was like, this man crazy. Let me get out of here. That was the time I almost died. Almost died. But many of us, we all have that story that we almost died. But God. If it wasn't for God, many of us would not be alive today. But really what I want to talk about today is I want to talk about that feeling that you get when you feel like you're about to die. Don't you feel it in your body? There's like this anxious feeling that you have in your body when you feel like you're close to death or you're having a near-death experience. And this is something worldwide. Everybody experiences it. But I remember for me growing up, it didn't just stop at when I was being chased by a dog. That fear of death would follow me throughout my childhood, teenage years. And at random moments, I just remember I would just be sitting there, just going out about my day, doing my thing. And then all of a sudden, boom, I had this vision that everything just ended. Life just stopped. And then this like fear would just grip my heart. I would feel this like tightening in my chest, this anxiety shooting through my body. I didn't have words for it at the time. I didn't know what I was experiencing. Anybody experienced that before? And you're just thinking like, what if everything just ended? What if I just didn't exist? And it would just, this fear would grip me and I didn't have the words for it. I didn't know that was called death anxiety. Did y'all know that? Death anxiety, where you're anxious about death. You know, we have a hard time talking about death in our culture. I remember my grandma, she's no longer living, but when she was living, she used to want to talk about that stuff. Like, when I die, I don't want this at my funeral. When I die, I don't want, I'm like, you ain't dead. Like, stop talking about that. Why are you talking about that? Stop talking like that. Because it makes us uncomfortable to talk about death and dying. And we have to wrestle with why that is. It's because of our understanding of death and dying. But I want you to know that Jesus came to introduce a new way of defining death and dying and life itself. My grandmother had that understanding. I didn't have that understanding. And so that would scare me. But Jesus wants us to not be afraid of death. He wants us to not be afraid of the thing that happens after we're no longer here on this side of life. And so the question is, what if we've misunderstood life itself? What if we just don't truly know what it actually means to live? Now, I don't know if you got any friends who smoke weed, but that's not the amen is at the end. I know it's 420 and everything, and y'all trying to get out of here, but hold on. Jeez Louise. But you know, when your friends smoke weed, it's not uncommon for them to ask real deep questions like that. Like, if you got any friends that when they really get high, that's when they get real deep. I mean, the questions and everything. And they'll call me and be like, they'll corner me, and they'll be like, so what if? Huh? What if? Okay, check it right, a funeral. What if the funeral is the lobby to heaven? Hold on, and whenever they say that and, you know it's not going anywhere. It's not going anywhere. But seriously, I haven't had any edibles. I'm good. These are questions that we truly need to answer. What if we have misunderstood what it means to live? The essence of life. How can we celebrate a resurrection if you don't know what it means to live? So all over the world, we're rejoicing about resurrection, but I need to know if we truly know what it means to have life. This is what Jesus says in John chapter 10, verse 10. He says, the thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. He says, but I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. Now, if you grew up in church, this is probably not your first time hearing this passage or reading this passage. But what you need to understand about this passage is it should confuse you a little bit. Because when you read this passage, Jesus is talking to people. He's looking at people and he's going, I have come that you might have life and have it to the full. These are people who are breathing. They're raising families. They're working. They're doing what they're doing. And he's like, I have come so that you might have life. And they're going, let me check my pulse real quick. Jesus, as far as I could tell, I think I'm up. I think I'm alive. Jesus looks at people who seem to be living and alive, and he says, I've come that you might have life. Could it be that Jesus is defining life differently? Could it be that their understanding of life is not really the essence of life? And in fact, Jesus has come to redefine the whole entire thing. What it means to live, what it means to die, what it means to be resurrected. He has come to flip the script entirely, and we need to understand this, write it down, that life isn't the presence of a pulse, it's the presence of Jesus. Life is not the presence of a pulse. You can check your pulse and then say, I'm living. No, no, no. If you're living and you have a pulse and you don't have Jesus, you're dead. And here's the other thing, the inverse is true, that death without a pulse is not the absence of life if you have the presence of Jesus. And we need to understand that, because so many of us, you think, I'm living my life, doing my thing, but you're not really living my life like it's golden, living my life. You're not really living. If you don't have Jesus, you're still in the grave. But those of us who have lost loved ones, we can't understand how they were so content because they had Jesus and they were nearing the end of their lives. And we feel their body, and the body feels cold, has no pulse, and our hearts become heavy, and we grieve. And we need to understand that the absence of a pulse is not the absence of life if the presence of Jesus is there. And so we're not going to elevate pulse over presence. Come on, somebody. As long as Jesus is in the picture, they're still alive and well and living. And that is the hope. That is the thing that should encourage us. And when we understand that the whole concept of life Jesus has come to redefine for us, then we can move to understand resurrection. Come on. Jesus, I want you to write this down. He doesn't perform resurrections. He is resurrection. He doesn't perform resurrections. He is resurrection. And it's not like he hid this about himself. He's been telling us this all along. In fact, in the next chapter of John, we were in John chapter 10 and John chapter 11, verse 25. Jesus is talking to a lady named Martha. Martha asked Jesus to come and perform a resurrection on her brother who has died. And Jesus comes in there, and they're expecting him to perform. And Jesus looks at her and tells her, John 11:25, it says, Jesus told her, listen, I'm not about to perform a resurrection. I am the resurrection and the life, and anyone who believes in me will live even after dying. Life isn't the presence of a pulse, it's the presence of Jesus. And we need to understand that he has come to redefine life. Life as Jesus defines it is him. It is him. And the more you have of him, the more life you get to experience. He has not come to bring you life. He is life itself. And there is no life outside of him. That's the foundation that I want us to approach Matthew 27 with. And so, in Matthew chapter 27, there's a story of the crucifixion. Now, all three gospel writers wrote the crucifixion. And those three synoptic gospels are Matthew, Mark, Luke. All right. The trick was I said synoptic gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Now, John is the fourth gospel, but it is not synoptic, all right? And so all three gospel writers write about this story, the crucifixion. But Matthew includes a detail that I think many of us miss it, but I want us to read it together today. Matthew chapter 27, verse 45. It says this. You guys came to church? All right. It says, at noon, darkness fell across the whole land until 3 o'clock. At about 3 o'clock, Jesus called out with a loud voice, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani, which means, my God, why have you abandoned me? Even Jesus is experiencing that anguish, that anxiety as he's facing death. It goes on, some of the bystanders misunderstood and thought he was calling for the prophet Elijah, one of them ran and filled a sponge with sour wine, holding it up to him on a reed stick so he could drink. But the rest said, "Wait, let's see whether Elijah comes to save him." Then Jesus shouted out, and he released his spirit. Now, I want you to understand what's happening right now. Jesus is experiencing death. He is dying right now. And the bystanders are looking to see what's going to happen. And they're thinking that somebody else might come and save him. Maybe he's calling out to Elijah, the prophet. And so maybe the prophet Elijah will come and save this man Jesus. And they're saying, well, let's just see if Elijah shows up. I mean, what's it to us? It goes on to say, at that very moment that Jesus shouted out and released his spirit, at that moment, the curtain in the sanctuary of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. The earth shook, rocks split apart, and everyone say that next word, tombs opened. Tombs opened. Tombs. Tombs? Like tombs? Like more than one? Plural? Tombs opened up. It goes on to say, the bodies of many godly men and women who had died were raised from the dead. What in the world is happening? They left the cemetery after Jesus' resurrection. This is good, y'all. This is good. They went into the holy city of Jerusalem and appeared to many people. And then it finishes out this story, and it goes on to say, the Roman officer and the other soldiers at the crucifixion, they were terrified by the earthquake and everything else that was happening. They said this man truly was the Son of God. Woo, that's good. Somebody should shout right there. Y'all like, what? What's happening? Can somebody clarify what's going on right now? It's Thriller in Jerusalem. Somebody. Thriller meets Chosen, bam. Like, I'm going to give you three things that Jesus teaches us in this story about the resurrection. The first thing is resurrection means power. Resurrection means power. Everybody say power. But the real question is power for what? Like power for what? And the answer to that question is found in this text. In this text, what you see is that Jesus dies on the cross, and when he dies on the cross, many tombs were opened up, not just his tomb. See, we celebrate the fact that Jesus rose from the dead, and he has an empty tomb, but I need you to know today that there was more than one empty tomb. There was a tomb with my name on it. There was a tomb with some of y'all's name on it. Come on. Who in here has that testimony? I could have died. I should have died. I would have died. And if it were not for the grace of God, I don't know where I would be. All I do know is there's an empty tomb that has my name on it, and I'm alive today to tell the story. Resurrection power means that there's more than one empty tomb. Yes, Jesus got up from the grave, but he didn't do it alone. When he died, it says, and tombs were opened. That means everything that was trying to keep you bound, every lie and every devil in heaven that said you weren't going to make it has lost its power at the moment that the curtain was torn into two. There's more than one empty tomb. There's more than one. It wasn't just Jesus. He died so that I could be raised. So if the power of resurrection also means that I get to participate in this, I want you to write this down. That resurrection requires participation. It requires us to be a part of the resurrection story. Here's the thing. Can I just vent a little bit? I love Resurrection Sunday. I love Easter. I love all of this. But sometimes we do more celebrating than participating. He's alive, he's alive. I see the empty grave. Hosanna. We sing all these songs. We celebrate the fact that Jesus, isn't that beautiful? Jesus is no longer in the tomb. He's alive, I tell you. He got up. All the while, you're still in the cemetery. You've got new life. He's raised you up from the dead. I want you to pay attention to what it said in Matthew chapter 27. It said that when the temple was torn in two, tombs opened up, and there were many godly men and women who were raised from the dead. After Jesus' resurrection, they went somewhere. They didn't just stay in a cemetery. See, when Jesus rose from the grave, that was their sign. It's time to move. It's time to leave the dead place. It's time to come out of the cemetery. It's time to leave that place. And what happened was when he resurrected from the grave, that was the thing they needed to move in the power that he had died and conquered the grave for them to have. And so the purpose of resurrection wasn't for them to stand there with new life and just start modeling in the cemetery like many of us do. You got your lashes on. Playlist is set. Hey, he got up. Hey, he rose from the grave. What you talking about? What you talking about? Just a dancing in a cemetery. And you celebrating. The purpose of resurrection isn't just for celebration, it's for participation. The same power that raised Christ from the dead is living and alive in me. God's power meets our participation. Can we go deeper for a second? Matthew chapter 27 was foreshadowed in the Old Testament. The story that we just read about, you said, I never read that story. But it was foreshadowed in the Old Testament in Ezekiel chapter 37. If you grew up in church, you might have heard this story before. I love it. I love church people. They're like, what are we shouting about? God takes Ezekiel to this valley of dry bones. Ezekiel has this vision. And in the context of this vision, God is taking Ezekiel and showing him Israel's future. Now pay attention to this. God is giving Ezekiel a vision of what's going to happen with Israel in the future. And so what Ezekiel is doing right now is he is participating in a resurrection. And he's participating in a resurrection that is supposed to be symbolic of what's going to happen in the future. That future is what we just read in Matthew chapter 27, and God is continuing to do that today. But I want you to see Ezekiel's participation in this resurrection. Ezekiel 37, I'm going to start in verse 4. It says this, Ezekiel's talking about God. He says, then he said to me, speak a prophetic message to these bones and say, dry bones, listen to the word of the Lord. This is what the sovereign Lord says. Look, I am going to put breath into you and make you live again. I will put flesh and muscles on you and cover you with skin. I will put breath into you and you will come to life. Then you will know that I am the Lord. God speaks to Ezekiel, tells him, this is what I want you to say to these dry bones. And then God stands there and he waits, metaphorically. And he waits. And the reason that God waits is because, yes, God can raise these dry bones to life, but he's requiring Ezekiel's participation in the resurrection process. And what that means is Ezekiel has to look at a dead thing, and he has to have enough faith in what God said to call these things to life. And for so many of us, we have a hard time looking at a dead thing and believing that God can raise this thing to. Come on. For 7 years, Jenny and I struggled to have a baby. And it was a hard thing to look out and see a valley of dry bones. And these dry bones were pregnancy tests. Negative. Every last one of them was negative. And it could be hard to look at that and believe that God is who he says he is. But you need to have enough faith to do what Ezekiel did. Ezekiel 37:7 says, so I spoke this message just as he told me. Come on, somebody. It requires our participation, but at the end of the day, I'm only going to speak what he tells me to speak. And so suddenly I spoke. There was a rattling, the noise all across the valley. The bones of each body came together and attached themselves as complete skeletons. Then as I watched, muscles and flesh formed over the body bones. Then skin formed to cover their bodies, but they still had no breath. And so at this point, you have to have enough faith to know if God said that these bones will live, I've got to keep on speaking what he said. He could have stopped right there and said, you know what? This is about all that's fitting to happen here. All of that was cool, but there's no breath. They're useless. What did he say? Ezekiel 37:10 says, so I spoke the message as he commanded me, and breath came into their bodies, and they all came to life and stood up on their feet, a great army. Let me tell you something. What if the army that you need to fight the battles you're trying to fight are the bones that you refuse to speak to? I need you to understand here today, I need y'all to put some prophets out of business, and I need you to start prophesying over your own situation. You need to look at that dead thing and say, you will live again. I'm not looking for a prophecy. I'm going to prophesy to the own situation that I'm experiencing. Dead thoughts, dead thinking, dead habits, dead relationships, I prophesy. Hear the word of the Lord, and I'm not going to stop until I see what God has said. Ezekiel 37:12 goes on to say this. When that great army was standing there, it says, therefore, I want you to keep prophesying to them, Ezekiel. This is what the sovereign Lord says. Oh, my people, I'll open up your graves of exile and cause you to rise again. He says this, though, then I will bring you back to the land of Israel. So you need to understand that the purpose of resurrection wasn't just so that they could stand there, but that they could move in the direction that God was taking them. God wanted to bring them to a place, but here's the thing about God. God will never bring you to a place where you're not willing to go. You got to participate in the resurrection story. And here's where the fulfillment happened. Remember that Matthew chapter 27? And that curtain was torn in two, and those bodies were raised, and there stood an army in a cemetery. And it says, then after Jesus' resurrection, come on, after Jesus' resurrection, where did they go? They went right back into the land, into Jerusalem, and they started appearing to many people to fulfill the thing that God has said, because God will not, he cannot, he will never lie. This is where God's power meets our participation. Come on. Don't just celebrate, participate. Participate. You ever been to an open casket funeral? Open casket funerals are where you can go and the casket is open, you can view the body. They dress the body up really nicely. They adorn the body so that the body looks presentable, but there's no life in the body. Many of us are living life as if we've gotten dressed up for an open casket funeral. The only difference is you got so much life inside of you, but you're laying in that casket as if he did not breathe new life into your lungs. and he has raised you up from the dead. If you woke up this morning, you've got life on the inside of you. That means there's a new beginning. There's a fresh start. You can try again. I don't care what happened yesterday. I don't care what happened last night. I don't care what the enemy told you about your circumstance. You can move into the land that God has promised you. All it requires is for you to participate. You might have to do some prophesying. You might have to go back home and tell some folks some things that might be uncomfortable for you. But I need you to believe that if God said it, it will happen just as he said. And here's the third thing. We've got resurrection power. Resurrection means participation. Here's the third thing that Jesus teaches us about resurrection, that resurrection is also a promise. Power, participation, and promise. The resurrection of Jesus is a promise, but here's the dilemma. It's not just a future hope, it's also a present reality. And these two, we have to hold in tension, that the resurrection is a future hope and a present reality. And the promise that we have today is that resurrection, I want you to write it down, resurrection is not the end of Jesus' story, it's the beginning of yours. And I know we read the resurrection of Jesus, and it tends to come at the end of the chapters in the Gospels. And we read the resurrection story as if it is the end of the story. But I need you to understand something about resurrection. That even though Jesus' resurrection is the end of his earthly journey, it is just the beginning of the story. And that your story doesn't even start until Jesus gets up from the grave. That's when our story truly begins. Resurrection is an inauguration. It's not a conclusion. It's the beginning of something new. And so the hope that we have, the promise that we have is because Jesus got up, I can look out at a new day. The dawning of a new day has just begun. And I want to speak to somebody in this room. You came in here because somebody invited you, not because you wanted to be here. You came into this room, you had no expectation of anything. And I just want to share with you that the power of the resurrection is that thing that you're looking at in your life right now, and you have determined that there's no hope for you, Jesus, by his resurrection, makes everything about that a lie. And he says, this is just a comma. Don't put a period. Don't put an exclamation point. Don't put any kind of thing there except for, but God. Because when God steps into the story, he brings new life. Resurrection is not the end of Jesus' story. It's the beginning of yours. Here's the promise that he brings in Revelation 21 and 4. He says, he will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and death shall be no more. Neither shall there be mourning, nor crying, nor pain anymore, for the former things have passed away. It's a future hope and a present reality. We get to participate in that life. The resurrection is not just proof, it's power. And we get to be a part of God's story that is still unfolding. If you're like me and you're still grieving the loss of a loved one, and it's hard for you to look past and see that a new day is just beginning. How? When they're no longer here with me. Jesus put death to death, and he offered a promise to us. And he said that death is the start of something new. It's not the end of the story, y'all. Maybe you've stood at a gravesite recently. Maybe you've had to bury someone you loved and you cherished. Maybe you've had to bury a dream, a future, some version of yourself that you thought would happen. But the promise is this, and I want y'all to really lean in and hear me today, that whatever feels final is just a moment in time before God brings the newness of life that he always had planned from the very beginning. And because he lives, your loss is not the end. So don't make your grief your grave. I'm talking to some people. For some of you, you're not moving in resurrection power because you're grieving the loss of someone else. And so you're not in the cemetery because of you. You're in the cemetery because somebody else is not here with you. And I'm here telling you today that that person, if they were a follower of Jesus, they are looking down from heaven going, get out the grave. We've got something to do. There's a new day ahead of us. And there's more ahead of us than what is behind us. If you're here today, I need you to know that the resurrection of Jesus was not just a symbolic gesture. It was a real physical bodily resurrection in that same spirit that caused him to rise. Do you understand that Jesus is the only person that can resurrect himself? When Martha calls him to perform a resurrection, she's treating him just like one of those other people who practice divination or the pagans who worship other gods. Hey, make this miracle thing happen. And so most of those people have to go and they pray, or they do pray to their gods. They do something to try to perform something. Jesus doesn't have to do that. He is the very thing that he's praying for. And so he's the only person that doesn't have to pray for someone else to be resurrected. He's the only person that can die and 3 days later resurrect himself. Come on, somebody. And so the power of the resurrection is not that just that he got up, but you can get up too. You can get up.